The clatter of silverware stopped abruptly. Conversations stilled. Every head in the luxurious dining room of Maison Duvall turned toward the marble-tiled center aisle, where a small, trembling hand reached upward. 9-year-old Emily Harrington, her legs encased in custom braces, sat rigid in her wheelchair, arm extended toward a woman no one else had noticed until that moment, a part-time janitor named Ava Thompson. Ava, a black woman in her early 40s with soft eyes and calloused hands, had just finished wiping down the mirrored corridor near the wine cellar. She wore a faded uniform and carried a cleaning cart still half filled with supplies. In the world of Maison Duvall, she was invisible. Tech billionaires, venture capitalists, and Boston's elite lined the leather booths and marble tables, their conversations floating above like silk. Ava's presence didn't belong. At least, not until now. The live pianist had just shifted into a soft jazz rendition of La Vie en Rose when Emily, without a word, extended her hand. No one knew why, not even her father, Graham Harrington, the notoriously private CEO of Harrington Systems and one of the most powerful men in the industry. His expression froze somewhere between confusion and embarrassment. It was the first time Emily had publicly attempted to interact with anyone beyond her family since the car accident that left half her body paralyzed. A hush fell deeper as the maître stepped forward, ready to intervene. One of the waiters whispered, "She's just the cleaning lady," but it was too late. Ava had seen the child's outstretched fingers. She paused, unsure if this was a mistake or a moment of truth. Then, gently, she took off her gloves, tucked them into her apron pocket, and stepped forward. Her hand met Emily's, and the restaurant held its collective breath. No one knew what was about to happen next, but they all felt it. A shift in gravity, a crack in decorum. Ava Thompson was no longer invisible, and for the first time that evening, the room wasn't watching the Harringtons for their money or power. It was watching a little girl who dared to ask, and a woman who dared to say yes. The atmosphere inside Maison Duvall had just begun to recover from the subtle ripple caused by Emily Harrington's outstretched hand. At first, the gesture seemed so innocent it went unnoticed, but as seconds passed and her small fingers remained extended toward Ava Thompson, something changed. Conversations slowed, forks paused midair, and heads turned with silent curiosity. It was as if the world inside that opulent dining room tilted ever so slightly, shifting its attention from million-dollar deals and curated wine to the quiet exchange between a billionaire's daughter and a janitor. Emily's gaze held no hesitation, only anticipation. Her wheelchair barely reached Ava's hip, but in that moment it was Emily who seemed to stand taller. The background music, a gentle instrumental tune from a live quartet, continued softly, weaving through the silence like an unseen thread. Ava hesitated. She had been clearing the edges of the floor, staying invisible like she always did. Being noticed, let alone invited, was not part of the job. Her gloved hands were still gripping a towel, her posture slightly bent from years of instinctive deference. Then came the voice, sharp, commanding, and public. "Step back immediately," barked the restaurant manager, a man named Philip Carden. His tone cracked like a whip across the hushed room. "Miss Thompson, this is not appropriate. Please do not disturb the guests. This is not a dance floor." For a fleeting second, Ava thought of retreating. Her training and years of survival told her to. But then she looked down at Emily, whose hopeful expression hadn't faltered, and something deeper stirred. Without a word, Ava removed her gloves one finger at a time and tucked them into her apron. She stepped closer, her movements calm and deliberate, then knelt beside Emily and offered a graceful bow, one that mimicked a stage dancer more than a janitor. "Only if you'll lead," she whispered with a smile. Emily's hand slipped into Ava's, and the little girl gently rolled her chair forward, guiding the dance not with steps but with subtle gestures. Ava followed with fluid, deliberate movements, her feet brushing the floor in time with the music, never overtaking, never correcting. For the first time, Emily was not being pushed, coached, or watched through the lens of pity or therapy. She was in control. Around them, time seemed to hold its breath. The clink of silverware was replaced by a soft rustling of disbelief. Guests sat stunned, unsure if they were witnessing an act of insubordination or something profoundly beautiful. Graham Harrington stood midway from his chair, uncertain whether to intervene or observe. His lips pressed tightly together, conflicted. This was his only daughter, the center of his world. And yet, since the accident that left her partially paralyzed, he had struggled to find his place in her life. The medical teams had been top-notch, the equipment state-of-the-art, but Emily's joy had remained elusive. Tonight, however, her eyes sparkled with unfiltered delight. Graham's mind drifted, uninvited, to the memory of his late wife, Claire. She had always insisted that Emily needed autonomy, not instruction. "Let her lead when she wants to," Claire had once said, her voice firm despite the illness that was consuming her. "Let her feel the power of choice." Graham had nodded at the time, distracted, thinking he understood. But watching Emily now, with a stranger, no less, he realized how far he had strayed from that wisdom. The music faded into a soft final note, and Ava gently stepped back, releasing Emily's hand with a playful curtsy. "Thank you for the dance," she said, her tone formal and warm, as if they had just completed a practiced routine on a grand stage. Emily beamed, her chest rising with a deep, proud breath. There was no applause, no fanfare, just the quiet awe of a room that had just seen something rare. Ava turned to leave. Her hands reached for the towel tucked into her apron pocket, her eyes back on the floor. She had no intention of making a scene, but before she could take a single step, Graham's voice cut through the silence, not with authority this time, but with something far less familiar: vulnerability. "Wait." Ava paused and turned slowly. Graham approached her, every eye in the restaurant locked onto him. He wasn't the towering figure from tech conferences now, nor the billionaire gracing the cover of Forbes. In this moment, he was just a father with no idea how to say thank you. "What's your full name?" he asked. "Ava Thompson," she replied, measured but not intimidated. He reached into the inner pocket of his tailored blazer and pulled out a sleek business card, house of embossed with gold trim. "My office," he said, handing it to her. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The gasps were quiet but audible. A few guests exchanged glances, some stunned, others suspicious. No one had ever seen Graham Harrington speak directly to staff before, let alone invite someone like Ava to his private office. Ava took the card, glanced at it briefly, then nodded. She said nothing. Her face unreadable, her posture straight. As she walked out of the dining hall, a whisper trailed behind her. "What just happened?" But she didn't hear it. Her thoughts were too loud, anxious, confused, cautious. Why would someone like him invite her to a tech empire's headquarters? What did he want? What did he see? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was, the next chapter of Ava Thompson's life had just been quietly but irrevocably opened in the middle of a restaurant that once made her invisible. The next morning, sunlight reflected sharply off the glass exterior of the Harrington AI Tower in downtown Boston, a monument to technological dominance, and the man who built it. Ava Thompson, dressed in her neat but modest beige slacks and navy blouse, stood at the lobby security desk, clutching a folded piece of paper with the appointment details printed in crisp black ink. Her presence stood in stark contrast to the tailored suits and sleek designer heels moving briskly past her, but her posture was calm, composed. After a brief call, the receptionist gestured toward the private elevator reserved for executive guests. "Top floor, Mr. Harrington is expecting you." Ava stepped in, her heart steady. This wasn't fear. It was clarity. She had faced far worse than an intimidating office or a billionaire's scrutiny. When the elevator opened, she was greeted by Margot Liu, Graham Harrington's chief of staff, who offered a courteous smile before leading her down a hallway lined with framed patents, AI innovation awards, and press clippings hailing Graham as a tech visionary. The walls echoed with efficiency and control, qualities Ava had long learned to navigate. Inside the glass-walled corner office, Graham Harrington stood by a minimalist desk, the Boston skyline sprawling behind him. He turned slowly, nodding in acknowledgement. "Miss Thompson, thank you for coming." Ava extended a firm handshake. "Thank you for the invitation." He motioned for her to sit, but the silence that followed was deliberate. Ava recognized it instantly, the same kind of silence designed to destabilize, to press the other party into explaining themselves first. She let it linger, unbothered. Graham eventually broke it. "Your name wasn't easy to find. Maison Duvall doesn't keep detailed records for janitorial staff. I'm technically contracted through a service, part-time nights only," Ava replied coolly. I read your resume, he said, sliding a folder across the table. You started a degree in motor rehabilitation therapy at Simmons, then dropped out. Why? My mother's stroke left her unable to work. My younger sister was still in high school. I did what I had to, Ava answered, unflinching. Graham leaned back. And yet yesterday, in less than 5 minutes, you did what none of Emily's specialists have managed to do in 2 years. Ava's expression remained neutral. She asked me to dance. I said yes, that's all. I'd like to offer you a position, Graham said. A full-time role as Emily's motor recovery assistant. Pay and benefits far beyond what you make now. Ava paused, searching his face. To work for you? To work with Emily. She considered his words carefully. No. Graham blinked, caught off guard. May I ask why? Ava leaned forward. Because Emily doesn't need another expert trying to manage her steps. She needs space to lead. To fail, to try again, on her own terms. I'm not here to simulate connection for a paycheck. That night, what happened between us wasn't therapy. It was trust. And trust isn't something you hire. Graham opened his mouth to respond, but she continued. You may be the most powerful man in this building, Mr. Harrington. But yesterday, for a moment, your daughter was the leader. No adult in her life, not even you, has let her feel that way in years. Not even her doctors. Silence stretched again, but this time it wasn't calculated. It was shaken. Ava reached into her worn leather satchel and pulled out a small, trifold pamphlet. She laid it gently on the desk. This is Rhythm Rise, a free community dance and movement therapy class for children with mobility impairments. We run on weekends out of a converted rec center in Roxbury. I co-founded it with a friend who teaches adaptive dance. Emily would be welcome. No cameras, no special treatment, just space to move. Tuesdays and Fridays, 4 p.m. She stood to leave, her voice steady. You have resources I'll never touch, but sometimes what a child needs most isn't what money can build. It's who's willing to follow when they lead. Graham remained seated, the pamphlet untouched, his jaw tight. Ava didn't wait for his response. The elevator ride down felt quieter than before, but inside her chest a strange lightness had begun to rise. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall windows of the community center's dance studio. Ava had just finished setting up the mirrored space, aligning the mobility aids and adjusting the sound system. She was not expecting visitors beyond the usual handful of families who trusted her unconventional program. But that day, something, or rather someone, completely unexpected walked through the door. Ava's breath caught slightly as she saw Emily Harrington enter the studio, her wheelchair gliding quietly across the floor. Right behind her, dressed in a light gray sweater and clearly out of his element, was Graham Harrington himself. He scanned the modest room with polite discomfort, his eyes lingering on the colorful hand-painted posters. Your rhythm, your power, move with joy, every step counts. Emily beamed when she spotted Ava and waved with enthusiastic energy. Ava stepped forward, her voice steady. Welcome, Emily, Mr. Harrington, she added with a slight nod. At first, Graham stood near the wall, hands in pockets, observing quietly. But his guarded presence started to soften as he watched his daughter interact with the other children, laughing, experimenting with movement, following music cues without fear or hesitation. Emily was no longer the fragile heiress whose every movement was micromanaged by private therapists. Here, she was just another child exploring her strength. Dr. Lila Mason, a renowned neurodevelopment specialist who served as an advisor to the program, approached Graham as he stood by the wall. She's doing well, Lila commented warmly, but I'm not surprised. This program is based on strong neuroscientific principles. Graham turned puzzled. You're saying this dance group is backed by science? Dr. Mason nodded. Very much so. In fact, Ava and I co-developed much of the methodology. We presented the research to several funding bodies, including yours. Her eyes were kind, but there was a firmness beneath the words. It was dismissed for lack of academic credentials, not lack of data. It hit Graham like a wave. Ava wasn't a part-time janitor with a flair for movement. She was a researcher, a developer of a framework that could revolutionize therapeutic support for children with mobility challenges. She was someone his world had overlooked simply because her resume didn't follow their rules. As the class progressed, something miraculous happened. In the middle of a group rhythm activity, Emily slowly shifted her weight. With eyes focused and breath steady, she rose slightly from her chair. Ava immediately adjusted the music tempo, giving the moment space. Step by step, Emily moved forward, without assistance, her legs trembling, but carrying her nonetheless. The studio fell silent as every pair of eyes turned to witness the impossible. Graham took a step forward instinctively, but Ava raised a calm hand. "Let her," she whispered. Emily completed 3 shaky steps before easing herself back down, radiant with joy. The applause was immediate and emotional. A freelance reporter covering community health projects had caught the moment on camera. Within hours, the clip had gone viral. That afternoon, during an impromptu press conference outside the community center, a reporter asked Graham about the future of Ava's program. Standing beside his daughter, Graham didn't hesitate. "We've spent years funding innovation that never touched lives directly," he said. "That changes today." He turned to Ava. "Miss Thompson, on behalf of the Harrington Foundation, we are committing a 5-year grant to fully support and expand your program. And I want to make one thing absolutely clear. This project will remain entirely under your leadership." The crowd gasped. Reporters fired off questions. Ava, though clearly stunned, remained composed. She stepped to the mic. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington. But this isn't just about me. It's about recognizing that lived experience and scientific insight can coexist, and that change often begins when someone dares to look beyond what the world expects." That day, a single step shifted not only Emily's future, but Graham's understanding of leadership, legacy, and who deserves to be at the helm of transformative change. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, the ribbon was cut in front of a sleek but welcoming new facility on the east side of Boston. Above the entrance, in bold lettering, stood the name, Lead Steps Center for Movement and Empowerment. The building wasn't the largest in the city, nor the flashiest, but inside it pulsed with a quiet revolution, one shaped by rhythm, resilience, and respect. Inside the main hall, children of all backgrounds and abilities danced freely across the floor, some with walkers, some in wheelchairs, others with braces or prosthetics. There were no therapists shouting commands, no sterile checklists on clipboards. Instead, there were instructors who listened, observed, and followed. The room was designed not for supervision, but for co-creation. It was a space where children were not just being helped, they were leading. At the center of it all was Ava Thompson, now the official director of Lead Steps. She no longer wore janitor's gloves or hid her qualifications. Dressed in a navy blue blazer with the center's logo embroidered over her heart, she spoke with a calm authority that came not from titles, but from lived truth. Ava had become something rare in the world of institutional care, a leader who listened first and spoke only after understanding. Emily Harrington, 9 years old and still full of fire, had been named the program's first youth ambassador. Her braces had become lighter, her steps more confident, but what shined brightest was the clarity in her voice when she stood in front of an audience. "Here," she once told a room of donors, "they didn't try to fix me. They let me move my way." Her presence, once dismissed as fragile, now carried the weight of a movement. Graham Harrington, too, had transformed. Once a man of rigid control and calculated decisions, he now came to the center regularly, not to direct, but to sit quietly in the back, watching, learning. Sometimes he helped set up equipment, sometimes he just listened to parents, absorbing stories he would have once ignored. In public, he credited Ava as the architect of it all. In private, he admitted she had taught him more about leadership than any boardroom ever could. Lead Steps quickly became a model across the country. Institutions began studying its approach to empowerment-based therapy. But for Ava, the goal was never fame or recognition. It was simple: to build a space where no child felt like a project and no caregiver felt invisible. Once disregarded as a low-level worker, Ava Thompson now stood as a living symbol of courage in the face of erasure. Her journey wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a testament to the power of seeing potential where others saw limitation, and to choosing dignity over comfort every single time. As the sunlight spilled across the dance floor and the laughter of children echoed through the halls, Ava glanced out a window, her gaze steady. What had begun as a single, unexpected invitation to dance had become something far greater, a movement rooted not in perfection, but in the bravery to begin. If this story moved you, share it. Because real change starts with someone willing to follow the rhythm of those who've long been unheard.